Hello everyone, I'm Andy Oakley, the leader of the One New Zealand Party. Today's the first of a series of videos in which I'll explain our economy in a way that you will understand. As we go through these videos, you'll realise that currently, apart from us, there's no political party in New Zealand that has a clue about the economy, and that's been the case for the last 40 years. While that might astonish you, I wasn't surprised. I saw this very same thing when I researched New Zealand history. University-trained historians are the last people you should consult if you want an accurate account of our history. The same is true with the economy. Groupthink in academia actually prevents new ideas from being discussed. You can imagine that the senior professors have their entire careers at stake if suddenly we realise everything that they have been teaching for a decade has been wrong. Like the fake news our education system has been teaching about the treaty, their neoclassical view of economics are also fake news. To put it simply, if you learn about economics in a university today, you'll be taught that the government must have reserves to spend. In other words, the government are in the same position as you and I as currency users. As currency users, we get money from working in businesses or selling goods and services. And you're taught that the government get money from taxing businesses and us. You'll be taught that the government, like us, must be careful how much they spend. Because if they overspend, they must borrow to make up the difference. You'll be taught that, like us, if the government borrow, this will result in debt. However, there's a fundamental difference between the government, who are the issuers of the sovereign New Zealand dollar, and us, who are the users of that currency. The difference is completely ignored by the neoclassical economic professors. Their out-of-focus economic lens has trapped us as citizens in a cycle of fiscal austerity where low wages and a lack of investment in infrastructure have been the norm for about 40 years. To make matters worse, the government, who do not understand how to drive an economy, have legislation, the Public Finance Act, that almost forces them to think and act incorrectly about the economy. As an example, you've seen teachers striking, people are dying in an underfunded health system, we have rising unemployment, and people are dying on poorly constructed roads. The public are complaining bitterly about all of this, yet the government are telling us that there's only so much money to go round. Rather than fix any of that, they would rather save $3.8 billion surplus for a rainy day. They think they must do that because they need reserves to spend. And while all this seems plausible, there is an increasing amount of macroeconomists all around the world trying to pressure these old school economists to wake up. I mean, this is serious stuff, and they have held us back needlessly for far too long. Knowing how an economy works is quite possibly the most important thing we need to get right, because everything flows from it. The reality is that they are unlikely to admit that they have it wrong, so it is up to alternative education methods such as these YouTube clips to educate the public so that you can make an informed decision about who you vote for. Today, I'm going to explain the term deficit. Now, this term is really important because it's the term that the government and everyone else misunderstand, which causes them to think that we must borrow. For example, if they calculate in the 2019 budget that they will spend $100 billion into the economy, which is not far off the real figures, and that at current level of taxing they will only tax out $80 billion. They think that they must borrow to make up the difference. And the borrowing must take the form of selling interest-attracting securities or bonds. And selling bonds is thought of as the government debt. It's not actually debt, but I'll cover that in a later video. Now, it is the figure of $20 billion, which is the difference between what they issue and what they tax out, which is known as the deficit. In other words, the $20 billion issued into the economy is still in the pockets or the bank accounts of the private people or businesses. It just hasn't been taxed out yet. We've been taught to believe the word deficit is a bad word when actually it's a good word. The reason it's a good word is because the government deficit is the private sector's surplus. Another way to explain it is, imagine that I'm the government and you're the economy, which is wage and salary earners, business and government services. I give you $100, and at the end of the year you pay me $80 back. Well, the $20 is still with you. It's not a debt. You have the $20. It's in the economy to be used or saved by the private sector. This incorrect view of what a deficit is and the propensity of successive governments to be fiscally austere or cheapskates means that there's not enough money in our economy. They tax too much because they think they must balance the books, and they spend too little because of the very same reason. This explains the extraordinarily high household debt in New Zealand. The figure has been rising for about 30 years. In 1990, it was about 28% of GDP. In 2018, it was 94% of the GDP, and there's every indication it'll keep rising. Now, this is a national disaster, and it's not just caused by Labour or National. It's caused by economic mismanagement at every level. However, the current government were voted in running on fiscal austerity because the public are just as ignorant as Grant Robinson and Jacinda Ardern on how to run an economy. Imagine the financial loss to young families who have borrowed extraordinary amounts to buy their family house if there's a crash. And the public debt figures are indicating, well, there just might be. Imagine the people dying from the mess our health system is in, and our elderly worried about not having enough to retire on. The economy is at the heart of a successful and sustainable country. We need to get this financially irresponsible government out, and you need to vote for a party who understands the economy, the One New Zealand Party. Go to our Facebook, click the sign up link and join, because your future depends on it. In my next video, I'll be looking at the term public debt and why you and the government have been looking at it entirely the wrong way. I've been Andy Oakley. Noho oro mai.